Sarah never imagined her morning would start like any other, only to unravel into a nightmare she couldn't have predicted. She stepped out of her front door at 7:15 a.m., the sun casting a golden glow across the quiet suburban street. The air was crisp and birds chirped lightly. A typical peaceful morning in her cozy neighborhood. She smiled to herself, thinking about the busy day ahead at the office, completely unaware that something was already brewing at her doorstep. Her hand lingered for a moment on the cold brass doorknob. A tiny flicker of unease passed through her mind, something she couldn't quite place. Maybe it was just leftover stress from the previous week. Maybe she'd heard a strange noise in the hallway last night, but she brushed it off. After all, this neighborhood was known for its safety and order. The HOA had always been meticulous, sometimes even strict. But she had never had any serious issues. Everything felt normal. Just a long day, she told herself quietly, as she locked the door behind her. The sound of the lock clicking into place was oddly loud in the stillness. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter around her and headed down the driveway, locking eyes with the familiar street lamp that marked the corner. It stood there, as usual, steady and silent, a witness to countless mornings just like this. At work, Sarah's day moved in its usual rhythm. Meetings, emails, phone calls, deadlines looming over her like dark clouds. She tried to shake off the small twinge of nervousness she'd felt that morning. Maybe she was just tired, or maybe the weight of an upcoming project was making her anxious. Whatever it was, she was determined not to let it distract her. Meanwhile, back at her house, something was happening, something completely out of her control. At precisely 8:30 a.m., two men in plain uniforms arrived quietly at her front door. They wore official badges and carried heavy toolkits, moving with a calculated efficiency that made them seem more like agents than maintenance workers. The neighborhood was unusually silent, the kind of silence that feels thick and watchful. One of the men glanced nervously over his shoulder before pulling out a handwritten note from his pocket. He taped it firmly to the door, right where Sarah would notice it when she returned. The note was brief, cold, and impersonal. Locks changed. For community security, please contact HOA for access. Neither man spoke to the neighbors passing by, who merely glanced with curiosity but quickly moved on. The workers exchanged hurried whispers, but took care to avoid being seen by security cameras on neighboring properties. Unknown to them, Sarah's eyes, home was not as vulnerable as it seemed. Hidden within the shadows of her porch was a sleek state-of-the-art security system she had installed months ago after a minor burglary scare in a nearby neighborhood. It was subtle, no flashing lights or loud sirens, just quiet, discreet cameras and sensors designed to record every movement without attracting attention. As the men worked, the cameras silently captured every detail, the angle of their tools, their cautious glances, the way they paused whenever a car passed by. Every frame was stored in encrypted files, accessible only to Sarah through a secure app on her phone. But Sarah had no idea any of this was unfolding while she was stuck in a boardroom across town, oblivious to the fact that her front door, the symbol of her safety and privacy, was being taken from her. She finished her last meeting and glanced at the clock. 5:10 p.m. Time to go home. What awaited her there would shatter the calm she had taken for granted and begin a battle she never expected to fight. The late afternoon sun had begun to dip behind the rooftops. As Sarah pulled into her driveway, she exhaled deeply, the stress of the day heavy on her shoulders, but eager to sink into the comfort of home. The familiar side of her house should have been a balm, but the moment she stepped out of her car, something felt wrong. She approached the front door and reached for her keys. The cold metal jingled in her hand as she slid the key into the lock, only to find it wouldn't turn. Confused, she tried again. Nothing. Her heart skipped. She fumbled for another key, a spare she kept hidden beneath a flower pot. Same result. The lock refused to budge. Sarah's pulse quickened. She glanced down and noticed something she hadn't seen before. The lock was new, sleek, shiny, and unfamiliar. "What the hell?" she whispered. She jiggled the handle, but the door was firmly locked tight. No amount of twisting or pulling worked. Her mind raced to catch up with the growing knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. Locked out? No, that can't be. She stepped back and scanned the door more carefully. That's when she saw it. The small, neatly taped note fluttering in the evening breeze. With trembling fingers, Sarah peeled it off and unfolded the paper. The words were blunt, almost cold. "Locks changed for community security. Please contact HOA for access." Her eyes darted around. No one was nearby. The street was quiet, save for the distant hum of cars on the main road. No explanation, no warning, no apology, just a notice pinned like a final verdict. Sarah's mind flicked back to that flicker of unease she'd felt that morning. Could it have been a premonition? A subtle warning? She cursed herself for ignoring it. Frantically, she pulled out her phone and dialed the HOA office number listed on the note. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. Her throat tightened as a cold realization settled over her. She was locked out of her own home, and no one was answering. Why? Why would they do this? She whispered. Into the phone. Her mind spun through every possible reason. Was there some emergency? Was her property involved in a complaint? Had she missed a crucial letter buried in her mail? None of it made sense. The weight of helplessness pressed down. She pulled her coat tighter around her and tried to think logically. Could she break in? Call a locksmith? But what if the HOA had legal grounds to do this? What if it was a violation of her rights? She glanced around, suddenly feeling exposed. Her neighbor's windows glowed softly in the dusk, but not a single person had come out to ask if she was okay. The silence felt indifferent, even cold. A sinking suspicion crept in. Was this some kind of power play? A message? Had the HOA decided to assert control in a way she hadn't anticipated? As she paced the porch, trying to formulate a plan, a sudden buzz from her phone made her jump. It was a notification from her security app. Curious and desperate, Sarah opened it. The screen loaded live footage from the hidden cameras she'd installed months ago after hearing about break-ins in the neighborhood. A flood of images poured in. 2 men arriving at her house that morning, toolkits in hand, moving quickly but deliberately. She watched, breath catching, as the footage showed them removing the old lock, installing the new one, and finally taping that same note to the door. But there was more. The men glanced around nervously, checking windows, opening her mailbox, and even reaching briefly inside the porch storage. Their movements felt less like routine maintenance and more like intrusion. Sarah felt a shiver crawl down her spine. Someone had invaded her space, without permission, without warning. Her quiet neighborhood, her sanctuary, felt suddenly violated, and now she was on the outside looking in. Sarah stared at the screen, the video replaying the same moment over and over. The 2 men in uniforms at her front door, moving with practiced efficiency. The coldness of the scene gnawed at her. Who were these men really? And why had the HOA sent them without a single warning? Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through the footage, hoping to find some clue that might explain this violation. But the video showed only silent actions. No words, no explanations. Just the silent replacement of her lock and that terse note taped to her door. It felt less like a security measure and more like an eviction. She glanced back at the note in her hand. Locks changed for community security. Please contact HOA for access. The language was so vague it almost felt designed to confuse or intimidate. No date, no prior notice, no invitation to discuss, just a firm statement of fact. Sarah's heart pounded. She tried calling the HOA office again, but the line went straight to voicemail. Emails she sent remained unanswered. Even the HOA's online portal showed no messages or alerts about any pending actions on her home. It was as if the lock change had been done in secret. Without any official record or warning, she felt utterly alone. The community she'd trusted for years seemed to have turned its back on her. She stepped back from the door, trying to think clearly. Was this legal? Could an HOA just change the locks on a homeowner's property without notice? She recalled vague conversations at past HOA meetings about improving security, but nothing this extreme. The more Sarah thought about it, the more the pieces didn't fit. Why would the HOA lock her out of her own home without giving her a chance to prepare? And if security was the real reason, why no announcement to the residents? The more she thought, the more Sarah suspected something else was at play, something deeper and more unsettling. She remembered the rumors circulating in the neighborhood recently about the HOA board becoming increasingly strict, about surveillance, cameras popping up in unexpected places, and about disputes escalating quietly but fiercely behind closed doors. Had she become a target? Was this an act of retaliation? Sarah shook her head, unwilling to believe her peaceful community had taken such a turn. But the silence from the HOA was deafening. As evening darkened, Sarah felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her like a storm cloud. Her phone buzzed. Again, a new message. It was from a neighbor, Mark, a man she had spoken to a few times, but didn't know well. Heard about what happened. That's messed up. The HOA's been acting weird lately. Let me know if you want to talk. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, relief mixed with fear. She wasn't entirely alone. She tapped a quick reply, grateful for the lifeline. Still, questions gnawed at her. Had anyone else been locked out or targeted? Was this just the beginning? That night, Sarah lay awake in a cheap motel room, locked out of her own home, surrounded by the uncertainty of what the HOA might do next. Her hidden security system remained the only witness to the day's events, quietly recording in the darkness. She vowed she wouldn't let this go unanswered. Tomorrow she would fight back. Sarah sat in her cramped motel room, the faint hum of the air conditioner, the only sound breaking the silence. She clutched her phone tightly, the glow from the screen casting shadows on her face, as she replayed the security footage again and again. Each time, the images brought fresh waves of disbelief and anger. The two men at her door, official looking, but faceless, had crossed a boundary no one had the right to breach. She had thought the cameras were just for peace of mind, a precaution, but now they were her only allies in this silent battle. The security system wasn't flashy or obvious, no blaring alarms or flashing lights. It was subtle, nestled in the shadows, capturing everything without announcing itself. Every movement, every glance, every action recorded and encrypted on a secure cloud server. Her fingers hovered over the phone screen, hesitant but determined. She began to comb through the footage frame by frame, hoping to catch something the first viewing had missed. Maybe a license plate, a badge number, a logo on the uniforms, anything that could identify these men beyond the vague HOA workers label. Suddenly, a figure appeared in the video's background. A neighbor, someone familiar, stood near the sidewalk, watching the workers intently. He didn't intervene or call out, but seemed oddly interested in the lock change. Sarah's mind raced. Was he a silent accomplice, or just a curious bystander? Then a flicker of movement caught her eye. Another shadow slipping past the porch, hidden from view of the workers, but right within the security camera's range. She zoomed in. It was a small device, a second camera, concealed behind a flower pot, aimed directly at her front door. The chilling realization hit her. Someone else was monitoring her home, at the same time as the HOA workers were there. But who? Her heart pounded. The quiet suburban neighborhood she loved suddenly felt like a surveillance state. Sarah's phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Mark, the neighbor who had reached out earlier. "You're not crazy. I've heard whispers around the block. Someone on the HOA board has been installing hidden cams on people's houses. No one knows why yet." Her fingers trembled as she typed back. "Do you know who or how to stop it?" Mark replied quickly. "Not sure, but I'm meeting some folks tomorrow to talk about it. You should come." Hope flickered through Sarah's despair. Maybe she wasn't alone after all, but the discovery of the second camera added a dangerous new layer to the mystery. If the HOA was watching her, really watching, what else had they been doing in secret? Sarah's thoughts spiraled to every private moment she'd spent at home, every conversation, every visitor. Were they all being recorded? Were her neighbors in on it? Was privacy even possible anymore? A sudden knock at the motel door made her jump. Her breath caught in her throat as she reached for the door handle. She peeked through the peephole. No one was there. Only a small envelope lay slipped under the door. Hands shaking, she picked it up and unfolded the note inside. The handwriting was hurried, almost frantic. "Beware who you trust. The HOA's eyes are everywhere. Stay safe." Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about locks or security anymore. It was a war for control, and she was right in the middle of it. Her hidden security system had caught everything, yes. But now it was also catching threats, silent warnings that sent shivers down her spine. She stared at the note, heart pounding. Tomorrow's meeting with the neighbors wasn't just about talking anymore. It was about survival, because in a community where even your own dog could betray you, trust had become the rarest and most dangerous currency of all. The next morning, Sarah woke with a restless energy. The cryptic note still burned in her mind. Beware who you trust. It was no longer just a warning. It was a challenge. Determined to fight back, she met Mark and a handful of other concerned neighbors at a small cafe just a few blocks from her home. The group was tight-knit, but wary. Everyone had stories. Strange noises, unexplained visits, sudden lock changes, and now hidden cameras. Mark pulled out his phone and showed Sarah a video he had received anonymously. The footage was shaky, but unmistakable. It captured several HOA board members walking through backyards late at night, planting small surveillance devices on homes, including hers. Sarah's stomach tightened as she watched the footage. There was no denying it now. The HOA was spying on its residents, using intimidation tactics disguised as security measures. One woman in the group, an older homeowner named Diane, spoke up. "This is invasion of privacy. Plain and simple. We have rights. They can't just do this without consequences." "But what can we do?" another neighbor asked. "They control the board. They decide the rules." Sarah felt a surge of frustration. She knew they had to gather proof, raise awareness, and push for legal action if necessary. The security footage she had was her strongest weapon so far. The silent witness that had caught the lock change in real time. Back in her motel room, Sarah connected her laptop to the security system and pulled up every clip from that day. She meticulously compiled a timeline. The arrival of the workers, the lock change, their suspicious behavior, and the hidden cameras on her porch. Then, she packaged it all into a clear video presentation. No edits, no spins, just the cold, hard evidence. She planned to bring it to the next HOA meeting. If she could get it in front of enough eyes, maybe the truth could no longer be hidden. As the afternoon waned, Sarah's phone buzzed again. This time, it was an unknown number. "Sarah," a distorted voice whispered, "stop digging. You don't want this to get worse." The call cut off abruptly. A chill ran down her spine. The message was clear. Her pursuit of truth was making someone dangerously uncomfortable. Sarah stared out the motel window. The streets below, now bathed in twilight. The security footage had revealed the truth. The lock change was no accident. It was part of a much larger, more sinister plan. But exposing it would come with risks. Yet for Sarah, there was no turning back. Her home, her privacy, and her peace of mind were on the line, and she was ready to fight, no matter the cost. The night of the HOA meeting arrived, and Sarah's nerves were a tangled mess of anticipation and dread. She carried her laptop like a shield, knowing the evidence it contained could either be her salvation or the spark that set the whole neighborhood ablaze. The community center was packed, residents whispering nervously, eyes darting around the room. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Some faces were sympathetic, others defensive, and a few wore expressions Sarah couldn't quite read. The HOA board members sat at the front, smug and unbothered, as if they were hosting a routine gathering, not facing a reckoning. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped up to the microphone. "I have something to show you all," she began, her voice steady, despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Something the HOA doesn't want you to see." She clicked open the video, and the room darkened as the footage played on the projector screen. The video showed the men changing her locks without notice, rifling through her porch storage, and planting hidden cameras. All actions done under the HOA's orders. Gasps filled the room. Whispers turned into murmurs. The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. One of them, a stern-looking man named Mr. Hastings, cleared his throat and spoke up. "This is an invasion of privacy," Sarah continued. "Our homes are being watched. Our property invaded, all without our knowledge or consent." Mr. Hastings shot back. "Security is our priority. These measures are to protect the community from crime and vandalism." Sarah shook her head. "Protection doesn't mean silence or violating our rights. We deserve transparency. We deserve respect." The room erupted into debate. Some neighbors voiced support for Sarah, demanding answers. Others sided with the HOA, worried about the supposed security threats, and trusting the board's judgment. Then, in the middle of the chaos, a voice interrupted. A quiet but firm voice, belonging to Diane, the older homeowner from the cafe. "Cannot allow fear to be used as a weapon. This isn't just about locks or cameras. It's about control." Suddenly, the room's energy shifted. More people spoke up, sharing their own stories of sudden lock changes, unexplained visits, and surveillance. The board's narrative was cracking. Mr. Hastings tried to regain control, but the tide had turned. The HOA's secret actions were exposed, and the residents demanded a full investigation. After hours of heated discussion, the board agreed, reluctantly, to form a special committee to review their practices and to halt any further lock changes or surveillance until the matter was resolved. Sarah felt a surge of relief, but knew this was just the beginning. As the meeting broke up, a man approached her quietly. It was one of the younger board members, his face troubled. "Be careful," he whispered. "Not everyone on the board agrees with what happened tonight. Some of us want change. But there are people who don't want you poking around." Sarah met his gaze, unwavering. "I'm not backing down." Outside, as Sarah walked to her car, she felt the weight of unseen eyes on her. The confrontation had lit a fire, but it had also painted a target on her back. Her hidden security system had caught everything, and now, so had the entire community. But the battle for trust and truth was far from over. The days after the HOA meeting felt like walking a tightrope for Sarah. The uneasy victory was bittersweet. While many neighbors now supported her, the undercurrent of hostility lingered like a shadow. Her phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls, some filled with encouragement, others dripping with veiled threats. Sarah's security system, her silent guardian, captured every unusual movement near her home. Unfamiliar cars idling on her street, shadows lurking just out of sight. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, Sarah returned from work to find a fresh note slipped under her door. This time, the message was chillingly simple. "Stop digging, or else." Her hands shook as she read it. The anonymous warning was unmistakable, a clear attempt to scare her into silence. But Sarah's resolve only hardened. She documented the note and uploaded images to her security system's cloud storage. Her hidden cameras recorded every corner of her property, capturing even the faintest sound of footsteps or rustling leaves. Then, late one night, the security alert sounded, a low, quiet beep, signaling movement on her porch. Sarah's heart jumped as she opened the live feed on her phone. The screen revealed a figure dressed in dark clothes, crouching near her door. The person moved cautiously, glancing around, then reached for something hidden beneath the welcome mat. Sarah's breath caught. She quickly contacted Mark, her neighbor and ally. "Someone's here," she whispered urgently. Within minutes, Mark and two other neighbors arrived, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The figure noticed the light and bolted down the street. Mark inspected the spot where the intruder had been. Hidden under the mat was a small, crudely made device, a camera aimed directly at Sarah's door. The group exchanged grim looks. The surveillance war had escalated from secret cameras to outright harassment. Sarah knew this was no longer just about her home. It was about taking a stand against the creeping invasion of privacy, threatening the entire neighborhood. The next morning, Sarah met with a lawyer specializing in HOA disputes. She wanted to understand her rights and explore legal options. The lawyer listened carefully to her story, eyes narrowing at the evidence. "This is serious," he said. "Unauthorized lock changes, secret surveillance, intimidation tactics. It could be a violation of several laws. We need to build a case, and fast." Sarah left the office with a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for the community's right to privacy, dignity, and safety. But as she looked at the footage once more, she noticed something disturbing. An unfamiliar face in the background of one clip. Someone watching her, their expression unreadable. The HOA's shadow stretched longer than she had imagined, and the deeper she dug, the more dangerous the truth became. Sarah sat in her living room, her home again, the lock finally replaced with her original key in hand. The legal battle had forced the HOA to back down, at least temporarily, but the true battle was far from over. She reviewed the final batch of security footage one last time before handing everything over to her lawyer. The mysterious figure she had spotted in earlier videos haunted her thoughts. Who was this person? Why had they been watching her so closely? And what were they hiding? That's when a subtle detail caught her eye. A small emblem on the figure's jacket. A discreet logo she hadn't noticed before. She paused the video and zoomed in, her breath hitching. It was the logo of a private security firm. Sarah's mind reeled. The HOA hadn't sent their own workers to change the locks. They had hired an outside company, a shadowy group she had never heard of. Determined to know more, Sarah and her lawyer dug into the firm's background. What they uncovered was shocking. The security company was contracted by the HOA president himself, Mr. Hastings, to enforce strict new security protocols. But those protocols had nothing to do with safety. They were about control, surveillance, and silencing dissent. Even worse, several board members had financial ties to the firm, a classic conflict of interest, hidden behind layers of secrecy. Sarah felt the full weight of the betrayal. The HOA wasn't protecting the neighborhood. They were exploiting it, armed with the evidence. Sarah confronted Mr. Hastings at the next HOA meeting, which was packed with curious and anxious residents. She laid out the facts: unapproved lock changes, illegal surveillance, intimidation tactics, and the covert contract with the private security company. The room erupted. Some residents shouted for his resignation. Others demanded a full investigation by local authorities. Mr. Hastings tried to defend himself, but the mounting evidence was undeniable. Within days, law enforcement opened an inquiry, and the private security firm's operations were suspended. Pending investigation, the HOA board was restructured, with new members committed to transparency and respect for homeowners' rights. Sarah's home was restored to her complete control, the locks changed back, and the hidden cameras removed. But the experience left a lasting mark. The neighborhood rallied around Sarah, grateful for her courage to expose the truth. And as the community healed, Sarah installed an even more advanced security system, one that she controlled fully, without interference. The ordeal taught her a powerful lesson. Trust is earned, not given. And sometimes, the greatest security comes not from locked doors or hidden cameras, but from standing up for what's right. As she sat on her porch one evening, watching the sunset, Sarah smiled quietly. Her home was safe again, and this time, so was she.